All right, welcome to Exploring Shinto. This is kind of our second episode of the new series, and you're going to get a few episodes like this where it's just me in a room talking to you about ideas. Today's pretty straightforward. We're going to be discussing how does one learn about Shinto outside of Japan, and how would one even practice Shinto outside of Japan. So I've got a variety of resources, books, and more books to suggest, as well as a couple great websites. So I will have the websites, of course, linked in the description. So that's an easy spot to check those out. Now, I'll go over these each one by one, why I would suggest it, what hesitations I have about it, and what you should take with a grain of salt. Some of them are going to be harder to find than others because getting books on Shinto in America or anywhere outside of Japan is a bit of a challenge, especially good ones. That's key. Good ones are hard to find sometimes. Now, as far as resources, I would definitely suggest looking up David Chart's website known as Mimisubi. This is a great resource for learning about Shinto, keeping on top of what's happening with Jinja Honcho, which is the largest Shinto organization in Japan, as well as just some great information, including how to do rites, rituals, things like that. In fact, I have one of his little books right here. It's very thin, but it's got a lot of good information. We're going to get to that one today. The other website I would suggest is Living with Kami. This is run by Reverend Olivia Berncastle. Fantastic blog. Goes into daily practice, uh, beliefs to an extent, as well as praxis. So the actual practice of Shinto. Shaking my camera a bit too much. Nevertheless, let's start with Mimisubi Essays on Shinto, Shinto Practice for Non-Japanese by David Chart. So this overall is a fantastic book. Easy to find. You can get on Amazon, for example. Couple small issues I have with it. First off, for its price, you don't get a lot. It's a bit more of a pricier book for the amount you get, but the essays are great. I also don't necessarily like the name so much. Shinto Practice for Non-Japanese, I really feel that should be Shinto Practice for overseas, because if you're of Japanese descent but don't actually know much about Shinto, this is still a great starting point. And it's really more for people who don't have easy access to Shinto in Japan or have never really practiced Shinto before. Great resource, definitely suggest it. Again, with those little things I'd suggest. Next one is Shinto The Way Home. This is an interesting one. What's great, first off, relatively easy to find. You can order this at Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon. There's an Audible version of it, which is great. Having an Audible version of any of these books is fantastic. It's written by someone who does not practice Shinto, focuses more on philosophy, and it really doesn't go beyond 2002. So it's a little dated as far as what it covers, because a lot has happened in the last 23 years with Shinto. It also tends to focus more on Shinto during the time period of the Meiji Restoration and during the World Wars, which isn't really Shinto. It was a political ideology under the guise of Shinto. And he really tries to sell the point that it was a very specific idea and that it was Shinto. I heavily disagree with him on that. Just from my own research and my own practice, they're not the same thing. So there are some cautions I have with this. Again, it is relatively easy to find. And the first few chapters are fantastic. But that last chapter, I believe it's chapter 6, is where it gets kind of into the area where I would definitely take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, chapter 6 is definitely that. Chapter 5, too. Chapter 5 and 6 would be a bit more grain of saltish. But the first 4 chapters are fantastic. He even talks about his own issues of the fact that he's not a Shinto practitioner. Give me a sec. Shinto Norito. This is great for daily practice. Definitely suggest this. Also written by This one's written by Anne Llewellyn Evans. If I remember correctly, she is now a Shinto priestess. I can't recall off the top of my head right now, but I believe that she has become a Shinto priestess. Last I heard. Nevertheless, great source of information. It was written specifically for the Tsubaki Grand Shrine originally. It has some fantastic information as far as ritual practice, specific Norito you can prayer, things like that. Good resource. Definitely suggest it. Again, relatively easy to find. Mostly going to find it online though. Harder to find it in stores. Uh, Essence of Shinto. Do not suggest this. Not because it doesn't have good information, but because the author is an anti Semite. I didn't know that when I bought it. I still keep it because I already own it. But problematic individual. And their version of Shinto, I have found out through my studies, is not really the universal idea of Shinto. It's their very specific sect of Shinto. So this one I put in the do not buy pile, and that is the essence of Shinto. Don't buy, stay away from it. Better if you just try something different instead. Next one is what is Shinto? This one is going to be hard to find here in America. So this is an American and Japanese book. It has a Japanese side. So if you look on this side, all the text is in Japanese. But if you look on the other side, all the text is in English. So you get two books for the price of one. It is going to be harder to find, but this is basically describing Shinto from the perspective of Lafcadio Hearn, who was an Irish Italian individual who moved to Japan for a while, and really compared Shinto to ancient Irish religion. So it's really interesting to kind of see this cross cultural view, especially during the early Meiji period when the nation was opening up to foreigners for the first time. It's an older book, a bit of a challenge to track down. I was lucky I found this one, but I do suggest if you can find it. Um, Shinto, Nature, and Ideology in Contemporary Japan. This is a heavier book. This is basically like grad school level information, but it's so good. I love this book. This is probably one of my favorites just because of how dense the information is in here. Again, this is also not written by someone who necessarily practices Japanese, but they are a huge researcher into Japanese culture and Japanese religion. And I've found their information to be quite enlightening when combined with other sources. By itself, you can kind of see a slight Eurocentric view. But when you view it with other materials, you can move past that and get to some really juicy bits. Um, That one's in Japanese. If you can find this and you speak Japanese, this is a good one. I don't speak a ton of Japanese, but what little bit I can get out of this has been really nice. I'm learning more, mostly because I want to really be able to read more into this book. For my Japanese viewers, please give me your thoughts on this book if you're in Japan, if you can track it down. But from what I've been able to glean from it, it's been great. Definitely want to see what other people think. Ah, this has been probably the most well-known book for Shinto. Shinto, the Kami Way by Sokyo Ono. This book has been probably one of the most widespread of the various books on Shinto, and it's fine. It's okay. Again, it's really, really dated. It's from quite a few years back at this point, but it gets reprinted a lot. And there are some issues. Primarily, there's a not so subtle um, thing in there, basically kind of stating that Shinto isn't really for non Japanese. Now, this view has changed a lot since this book was written. Most shrines and most Shinto practitioners and priests, in fact, there are non Japanese priests, view Shinto as being open to everyone, not just Japanese people. The main reason why this book is kind of like it's not necessarily for Japanese people is it very much says Shinto cannot be separated from Japanese culture. I'm going to take it a little differently though. Japanese culture cannot be separated from Shinto. It's the reverse, in my perspective. And when you view it that way, it's much easier to be able to understand Shinto from each individual's perspective, as well as see how Shinto changes depending on the subcultures in Japan, depending on the regions of Japan, and even how it changes outside of Japan, because there are shrines outside of Japan and they do have their own ways of doing things to naturally adapt to those environments. When we say you can't separate Shinto from Japanese culture, yes, ish, but also no, because Japanese culture is so influenced by Shinto that sometimes it's hard to understand that, in fact, it's not Shinto that emulates Japanese culture, it's Japanese culture that emulates Shinto. And, of course, Buddhism and Confucianism. Nevertheless, Shinto can survive outside of Japan. It's really what I'm trying to get at. The big one, Shinto: A History by Helen Hardacre. Helen Hardacre. I was right the first time. I have read through this once. I'm trying again because there's so much information. I've had to start over a few times, and this covers almost all of Shinto history. This is legitimately a magnum opus when it comes to history. I'm a history buff, so I love that aspect. It doesn't really go into daily practice, doesn't really go into ritual, but it shows where it came from. And that's important. Knowing the history of Shinto helps you gain a deeper understanding of Shinto as a whole, where it's been and where it's going. It's a few years old now, so it hasn't really kept up with the more recent changes to Shinto and some of the discussions that are happening. We live in a very interesting time for Shinto, so definitely check out Mimi Subi from David Chart, because he covers a lot of the new things that are happening, the changes that are occurring all the time. It's fascinating. Definitely keep on top of that. Now, I've got three more books here that I'm going to talk about. These ones are hard to find in America, really hard to find in America, but if you can, perhaps find them online, do some eBay searches. If you have friends in Japan, see if they can track them down and not email them, mail them to you. So first off is Shinto Shrine. This talks about being a bilingual guide to Japan. It is by Kato Kenji, has beautiful illustrations. Let me just give you a couple samplings of some of these illustrations. So, for example, if you've looked up like precincts or setups for shrines, this is one of the images you might find. This is the book it comes from. This book has amazing watercolor paintings. It is in both English and Japanese. So for Japanese speakers, still useful for you. Mine is filled with a lot of notations and highlights and dog ears. It's seen a lot of use. It's fantastic for understanding how shrines work. We don't have a lot of shrines here in America. We don't have a lot of shrines outside of Japan. There are more in Hawaii than basically anywhere else outside of Japan. Um, but it's still worth checking out so you can understand, if you ever do make it to a shrine, the different parts. But Shinto doesn't necessarily need shrines. We're going to get to that in a future video. But just something to be aware of. The next one is Shinto from an international perspective. This one I really like because it does talk about overseas shrines. It talks about festivals. It talks about worshippers. It talks about different types of shrines, different shrines in general, practices. Um, it's great. I enjoy it. I've got a lot of notes in this one, and it also has beautiful. Let me find it. Pictures of various shrines, including Issei Jingu. So a great one there. Definitely suggest this book for that reason. Just the beautiful pictures are worth it by itself. And then a visual guide to Shinto. This is going to talk about like kamidanas. It's going to talk about ritual. Oh my gosh, my brain just died. Give me a second. Basically, offerings you can do for the kami. Shimenawa is going to talk about. It's going to really talk about all the various aspects. A lot of these you will see if you start practicing in your own home to an extent. You can make your own Shimenawa. You can make a kamidana. Um, various things like that. Again, this is in both English and Japanese. The Japanese is written English style, so, well, not necessarily English style. Actually, it is English style. Written English style, which is kind of interesting, instead of the typical up down, which you don't see as often in Japan anymore. Nevertheless, fantastic book. Definitely suggest it. So those are books I would suggest and ones I wouldn't. Like I said, there are some where it's like, it's fine. Others that I just absolutely adore. Um, Kind of how I go about things. Now, there are a couple videos online that suggest they don't really tell you about Shinto or how necessarily to practice Shinto. I will have those linked in this area or somewhere up here, hopefully. One is from Issei Jingu, and one is surprisingly a Vocaloid song that covers. You know, I'm not going to spoil it. I suggest watching it. Put on English subtitles if you don't speak Japanese, because they are excellent subtitles. They'll really give you a bit of an idea of what it's about. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what I would just want to talk about today. This is kind of a more casual video, just giving some basic ideas, books I would suggest, and kind of starting points. So start with that, learn some of the vocabulary if you can, and I will see you in the next episode. Oh, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell notification, and we'll go from there. Share with your friends if you want too. It's terrible, but I hope my video isn't too bad for you. All right, bye now.